car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
And welcome back to the attorneys. So glad to have you with us, joining us each week where we unpack a lot of topics here. In fact, today we're going to be talking about trucking accidents. Why? Because it's a really big deal. In fact, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation, there are around 500,000 trucking accidents every year. And of those 500,000, about 5,000 fatalities. So it is indeed a big deal, and it's a lot to cover. So, Josh, we want to get right into it as we get to Josh Wright with Hollis, Wright & Clay, managing partner, and also Michael Elrich joining us as well. We've talked about this before, Josh, but there's so much to cover.
Well, you know, there is, and where we live in Alabama, whether you're down in the south side of the state or in the north side of the state, we have a lot of interstates that run through our state, and that ultimately contributes to commercial vehicles being in our state a lot. You know, I'll give you another statistic that you started with, 500,000 accidents. About a third of the accidents that relate to fatalities involve some level of impairment, albeit alcohol, drugs, etc. So those are all things that are evaluated in cases we have. Michael Eldridge from our firm, one of our lawyers, is on today, and I decided we were going to bring Michael on because this is kind of his sweet spot. This is what he does for a living. He's really, really good at this. He's got a lot of trucking cases going at any one time, and I know he's got a really big one going this year that's getting ready for trial. And so, first of all, glad to have you on, as always.
Glad to be here.
And, you know, this is not an easy area of the law. Lots of people say they want to be trucking lawyers. The reality is it really takes a skill set to understand what you're doing.
Yeah, there's been many books written on trucking litigation versus everything else, and there's a reason for that. And you know my history. The first part of my career, almost a decade, I spent defending trucking companies. And since 2017, I've been at Hollis Wright. And you're right, these cases are different. They're complicated in the sense that they are covered by a totally different subset of law, federal law, that is not like a normal car accident case. And there's a reason for that, right? Because trucks are inherently more dangerous than a passenger vehicle. They're heavier. They've got 80,000 pounds sometimes behind them. They're harder to stop. It's hard for them to make evasive maneuvers. So there's a lot that goes into it from the start, not just the day of the accident, but all the way back to when truck drivers are licensed, they get their commercial licenses, they're hired. There are laws that start from the beginning that you really have to know what you're doing, that a lot of lawyers recognize that they need help with that, much less lay people. So very, very important topic for people to understand.
You know, Art, a lot of people don't understand that those that operate commercial vehicles on our roads are subject to additional standards. When we leave tonight and we go home, we're subject to certain rules of the road to operate just a regular passenger vehicle. A transportation company is subject to not just the rules of the road, they're subject to those, but also heightened standards and responsibilities under certain federal regulations. And that is what allows for the need to completely and fully evaluate these cases to determine, did someone meet the rules of the road that was a commercial driver? Did they also meet the federal standards? And then did their employer meet the federal standards to make sure they even should have been on the road in the first place?
Indeed. And Michael, I've heard about your prowess in this area. My first opportunity to get a chance to meet you. Glad to meet you finally. Talk about that, the laws that govern the trucking companies and the trucker, him or herself.
So when we went and got our licenses and we were 16 years old, we just went to the DMV, we did a test, we did a driving test, and we were subject to the Alabama rules of the road and the regular laws like everyone else. With truck drivers, when they go, they get what's called a CDL, and at that moment, whether they're driving a commercial vehicle or they're in a passenger vehicle, they are subject to a different set of laws that are governed under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or the FMCSR, which is the regulations. And so there are a lot of things. For example, they have to get routine physicals, medical physicals. When they are driving trucks, they have to keep log books. From a supervision standpoint from the company, there are a ton of rules in terms of what this person's driver abstract looks like, how many speeding tickets they have ever been arrested for a DUI. Because if those things exist, if they check those things and they exist, then that person may not qualify to be a CDL driver, a commercial over-the-road driver. So from the start, you're right, these regulations start with the company, which is who are you hiring? We can't just put anyone behind these vehicles. They have to be qualified. They have to have these background checks. They have to have medical checks, because when they are in these vehicles, it's inherently dangerous that if they aren't qualified or if they have a history that shows that they shouldn't be entrusted with these vehicles, then we can't put them in those vehicles. So it starts with the hiring process, then the supervision process, and then ultimately when that CDL driver gets in the truck to make sure that they're doing everything, keeping their log books. If they're carrying hazardous materials, there's a whole other subset of whether insurance coverage, what their responsibilities are, but all of that is governed by the federal government and the FMCSA through their regulations.
And Art, we're not saying that every trucker does it the wrong way, right? This show is about the truckers that aren't doing it the right way, and there are plenty of those. But there are plenty of transportation companies, and we get calls all the time during this show. I'm a truck driver. I've never had a ticket. I've had no FMCSR violations, etc. The reality is there are plenty of good drivers out there on the road, but what Michael just outlined, which is from the start of the hiring of that person that has a CDL license all the way through to should they be operating that day, that is the type of thing that is evaluated by a law firm like Michael does on a daily basis at our firm to determine, does this person, does this individual, does this company meet the elements required to even have this driver on the road in the first place? Should this driver have been on the road at the time of this accident, etc.? So you can imagine it's a fairly comprehensive and complete evaluation. It's not as simple as saying, well, a truck driver caused an accident. I'll tell you another thing that's interesting that's changed a lot in the last 5 years. I know Michael's seen it, is the onset of video. Not just video on the truck, but video of the driver. Many transportation companies now have two-way cameras where they're able to evaluate and view what was their driver doing under a certain circumstance and what was the vehicle doing under that circumstance. And that's something that I know you see all the time.
And you said, I want to add too, having represented some really good motor carriers, trucking companies, there's a lot of not just drivers that are doing things the right way, there are a lot of companies that are doing things the right way, putting a lot of money each year into teams to make sure that they are complying with the FMCSA. And that's not the issues that we're talking about, because there's a lot of, especially when we see these smaller companies that, finding drivers is hard and cutting corners is easy. And when they do that, typically when we see these really bad accidents, that's what's happened in these situations, that when you go look at their FMCSA files, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and that's what we want to avoid to keep people safe.
Michael is an expert in the area of driver fatigue and hours of service. I want to talk about that when we come back. I know we're getting ready to go to break, but that is a huge contributing factor to the vast majority of these accidents that we see, is some level of lack of awareness or fatigue, and it's something that he can hit on and talk about.
There is so much to know. Michael, thanks so much for being here. Josh, and we're going to go ahead and take that break right now. But I also want to remind you that there is a number. It is the right number to call. I know you hear a lot about numbers throughout the day, but this is the right number to call. It's 1-844-LAW-TALK, and you can reach an attorney from Hollis, Wright, and Clay. That call is free. It is confidential, and you can do it right now. Just make sure you keep your set right where it is, because we'll be back as we're talking trucking accidents on The Attorneys. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was
We would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
That we would be able to use the resources of the many lawyers we have at this law firm to create a plan that had a lasting impact that also gave back to the community at the same time. And I think we've done just that with the attorneys.
Did you know a tractor trailer weighs upwards of 80,000 pounds and a car only weighs 4,000 pounds? Well, that's a big difference if you've been injured in an accident. Call us now. Our attorneys are standing by right now to help. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to the attorneys. We are talking trucking accidents, and you may get from time to time, you'll see information that we'll put up on the screen to make sure that you're informed about various things happening out there. In this case, trucking accident, and Josh hit on this earlier, but nearly 30% of all commercial truck accidents are caused by driver fatigue. That comes to us from the National Center for Statistics Analysis. We have got a lot to uncover. We want to get back over to Michael and to Josh as we continue this discussion on trucking accidents.
Well, and Art hit on it on the way in from commercial. The reality is that a lot of these accidents that you see in your practice relate to some level of driver fatigue. And I want to unwrap that just a little bit. When I'm driving on the interstate now and I see a truck driver, I assume that he's meeting his hours of service and meeting his fatigue requirements, and that he is alert and aware and prepared to drive that day, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, I would not make that assumption.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you should assume the opposite, but there's a reason for this, right? When we get a statistic like Art just gave us, my first question always is why? Like, why is that the case? I mean, I've driven tired before, but not that much. And the fact is, two things. Number one, we don't drive as much as these people, right? By and large, unless we're going on vacation or we're traveling somewhere in our professions, in our daily life, we're driving back and forth from work, picking kids up from school, things like that. These people are on the road a lot. This is their living. So when you combine that with, think about what the industry is, Josh, in that it is driven by meeting deadlines. They have to get item A from this city to this distributor by this date. And if they don't, that affects how much they get paid, whether they get paid at all, if they're in breach of contract, and that is going on all over the country. The logistics of making sure everyone gets there on time with things like traffic, with shortage of drivers, that creates a strain on some of these trucking companies who are trying to meet deadlines. So if they don't have enough drivers, or if they're not meeting those deadlines, the impulse is to push it. Well, the law assumes that people are going to do that for very good reason, because they do. And so the FMCSA has requirements where you cannot drive for 10 consecutive hours after being 11 hours off. You've got to put everything in these logbooks of when you're resting, when you're actually on the road, how long you're on the road, to make sure that these drivers are not just pushing it, pulling an all-nighter in a commercial vehicle, like I said, that can weigh up to 80,000 pounds going 70 miles an hour on the interstate, because all too often they do that and they violate these laws. And if you know someone who is competent after one of these wrecks that can go through the company and the driver's FMCSA file and look at those logbooks, because it's not easy. It's not just check boxes and says, I wasn't working. This is all recorded data, right? And that's somewhat new. But being able to go through and say, how long was this person on the road? Where is this gap? What were you doing in this gap? Were you driving? How did you get from point A to point B, but it's not in your logbook? That can establish liability in and of itself in very, very serious accidents. So having somebody in those situations that knows how to look at those files and has experience with those files is all too important. Because like I said, the law is not simple, much less going through the files not simple.
Yeah. Let me tell you how smart this guy is, and it's why I brought him on to talk about this topic today. He uses experts that don't just evaluate logbooks where someone has to write down what they're doing every 15 minutes throughout the day if they drive tractor trailer. He will evaluate 30 to 45 days worth of logbooks to find trends and then compare that to Qualcomm data, which is the digital data and dispatch data from the dispatcher and the vehicle, to determine whether or not the logbook is doctored or whether the logbook is legitimate, and uses experts to do that to determine, is this person telling the truth? Are they not telling the truth? Are they actually overdriving? Is this a fatigue accident when we thought it was not a fatigue accident at all? And some of the stuff that he's able to uncover with his experts, pretty impressive. So that's why we bring Michael on shows like this.
Those kind of metrics make a difference in a case, and it's so important that Michael does that. But as I was listening to Michael, I just thought back to this scene where I'm driving down the road and there's a truck in front of me, there's a truck on either side of me, there's a truck in back of me, and just fear just overcomes you. And you think about the accident, you think about if something happens and I get in the accident, I'm going to be hurt. And if I get hurt, how much time do I have in order to file a claim? Should I need to file that claim?
That's a great question, because when you're going through something like that, if somebody dies, there's a lot of things that you're dealing with that isn't talking to an attorney. You're not thinking about, should I take pictures of this or should I preserve the evidence scene? We can do all of that from the get. I've had accidents where people have died, their family members were there, it was on the other side of the state, and we had engineers and experts and Michael Eldridge on the ground in rural Alabama, surveying the scene, have drones that come over, do flyby, preserving evidence, going into these trucks and pulling the data out of them to show exactly what that truck did in the 60 seconds before, like he said with the Qualcomm data, figuring out if there's a dash cam. So there's a lot of things that you need to do immediately. Now, as it relates to filing a lawsuit, just like any other lawsuit in Alabama, you're going to have a 2-year statute of limitations. There's a lot of work that needs to go into it before you just fire off a lawsuit. There are some circumstances where you would want to file a suit fairly quickly, but by and large, there's a lot of investigation that needs to go on. But the more time you give an attorney and the closer in time to the incident is all too important, because evidence doesn't just sit there and preserve itself.
Do you find that there are times, and I know troopers and local police officers are inundated with accident investigations, et cetera. Do you find that there are circumstances that you've even got to work with your law enforcement professionals after your experts have completed their work and you're on the ground early with those experts, that you've got to unwind some of the stuff that they may have identified initially? And I know officers are generally really good about, hey, look, all I did is I put my report together based on the information I had. This additional information changes my view. Do you see that sometimes?
Yeah, and the good thing with commercial accidents, especially if it's a reportable accident, there's serious bodily injury, is typically you're going to have a state trooper that's going to come that has accident reconstruction certification that can mark up that scene and preserve that evidence. Yeah. So getting out to them and figuring out who investigated it very quickly to get your experts, more importantly your experts, not
That's
you,
right.
in touch with them is very important. But our law enforcement in Alabama is very, very good with commercial vehicles when there's serious bodily injury.
So this is a simple tease for after the commercial break. You ready?
Ready.
How does someone pay for all this? It's a great thing that I want Michael to unwrap, because people are going to be surprised how anyone can do this with the Wright Law Firm.
And whenever you're talking money, that is always a good tease.
That's right.
How do you pay for it? We're talking
right.
trucking accidents on the attorneys. We're going to take a break, reminding you to call 1-844-LAW-TALK. Reach an attorney, free, confidential, at Hollis, Wright, and Clay right now. Stay there. We'll be back after this.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys.
Did you know when you hire Hollis Wright, you are still in charge of your case? Our attorneys at Hollis Wright are client-centered, allowing you to help us control your case and result. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. If you're not already doing it, go ahead and follow Hollis Wright and Clay on all of your social media channels. There you can get good information anytime you need it. We're back and we're talking trucking accidents, and we went to break, Josh, and you had this great tease because you were talking about all the money that you had in your pocket that was going to pay for all of this.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. What you highlighted in the last segment, near the end of the segment, was really the work that goes in to evaluating these cases comprehensively, and the importance of not waiting until 2 years to get someone involved. You know, you want to be competing with the commercial carriers, rapid response team that's going to be on the ground. You want to have someone on your side helping. How is that funded, and how does that work in a law firm like our law firm in the types of cases that you handle on the commercial side?
Well, let's go back to what you just said, because you stole my phrase that I was going to use, the rapid response teams. Art was talking about, you know, having this fear, and then if something happens, how long do I have and what should I do? And it's such a good question that people don't think about because they haven't been in that situation. Mm-hmm. So, and that's natural. But here is a fact. Because I've been on one of those rapid response teams, and I should say I've been on hundreds of those rapid response teams. Commercial carriers are in this business. It's a cost of doing business. People are going to get hurt, people are going to get killed, and they have teams in place for when that happens. Not to protect the people that get hurt or the people that get killed, to protect themselves, to protect their industry, to protect their business. And when I say teams, I'm not just talking about employees of the trucking company. I'm talking about insurance companies that solely do the work of trucking accidents. I'm talking about lawyers in every area of the world that are immediately boots on the ground out there with the same experts that I just talked about. They have money in place for that, to be out there the day of the incident sometimes. So a normal person, you and I, if this happens, we don't have a team standing by, right? We don't have the money to say, where is this expert? You know, how do we get these people out here? We understand that as lawyers. We understand that these people need help. So the answer is, when you're in one of these accidents, you don't pay a dime. We take that risk on for you. And it's a pretty expensive risk. These engineers that I talked about that are traveling to rural Alabama and surveying and flying drones, they don't do that for free. So we take on the risk, we take on all of that cost, and if it turns out that there's no case for whatever reason, we never go back to the person that was injured, that was in the accident, and say, you know, we spent tens of thousands of dollars with engineers and experts to, you know, get this data, to do all of these different things, to survey this accident scene, pay us that back. No, we eat that cost because on the back end, hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully that we can recover for our client, and that's the way we will be paid any expenses. So anyone who's in an accident that thinks, I just can't afford to go up against the trucking company, I promise you, call Hollis Wright. Yeah. Like Art said, our firm is set up, Josh is set up in a way that we can afford to go against any company, no matter how big or small.
Yeah, and you know, here's the thing. There are a lot of good law firms out there, right? The reality is this is something that we have an expertise in, that we would love to help someone on. And we're here and we're prepared and we have the relationship with the experts to be able to hit the ground running. The goal is, and one of the mottos we've had for over 20 years is leveling the playing field. And what that really means, and you could see it in Michael's passion because he's been on both sides of the bar. He was on the defense side and also the plaintiff side. You can see the passion based on his knowledge of this area of the law and the importance of hitting the ground quickly. Leveling the playing field simply means that we want to provide a quality of service on the plaintiff side that is equivalent to or greater than what the defense bar is able to provide and what these companies are able to provide in their evaluation and their boots on the ground and their rapid response teams. We're leveling the playing field.
And I'll add to that, because being on the other side, I've been out on one of those rapid response teams and been prepared in a situation where we were doing everything to prepare a defense, and seeing someone like Carter Clay show up with his expert, and it matters. It affects them. When you have boots on the ground and you're prepared like they are, and those lawyers and that rapid response team sees that the person that was injured has a team out there too, that affects them. And it helps exactly level the playing field. It does not go unnoticed.
And I don't know if there's a quick answer to this, but we haven't touched on it. And oftentimes, though, alcohol or drugs can play a part in that. What's the impact?
It's a huge impact, and we've had many trucking accidents where the commercial driver was under the influence of alcohol, drugs, methamphetamines, and that is just another exacerbating factor in terms of now you're bringing in toxicologists. It's a whole nother team, a whole other thing to unpack. We could do another show on that, but certainly you're going to want a good team if you've got the commercial side of things, the FMCSA side of things, and now you're bringing in the criminal side of things. It changes things dramatically.
Michael, thank you. Great job, as always.
Yeah, great job indeed. And thank you for joining us here on The Attorneys. I want to remind you once again, it's 81844-LAW-TALK. To reach an attorney from Hollis, Wright, and Clay can answer your call, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.